All right. I guess we can begin now. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We understand it's pretty late Friday evening, so we definitely appreciate your time and your willingness to participate today. We also want to thank CEJA, the California Environmental Justice Alliance, for their help with our presentation slides. And we'll share a little bit more about our workshop objectives today, but before we jump in, we'll start with some introductions. So first, this workshop is being hosted by the Environmental Justice Program at Catholic Charities, Diocese of Stockton. Our EJ program provides advocacy for vulnerable communities at the local, state, and regional level. In the past, we have worked on Stockton's general plan and are currently working on the City of Modesto and the City of Manteca's general plan. So with that being said, my name is Melissa Vargas. I am the San Joaquin County Program Specialist, and I will turn it over to Jonathan. Your call will be connected.
Thank you, Melissa. Hey, everyone. Jonathan Pruitt, Environmental Justice Program Coordinator at Catholic Charities, Diocese of Stockton. Let's see here. So you definitely want to thank you so much for being, especially on a Friday evening, but I just realized that it's still light out. So technically it's not as dark as it is. So that's why I still feel alive and awake. So we'll definitely break out into groups in the workshop. And then we'll also talk about ways to really stay engaged on the general plan, and providing some key suggestions that you can provide to your city leaders and the city planners. And definitely should also be mentioned that this workshop is definitely not city sponsored. We didn't want city staff to be in attendance. And the reason why was because we wanted residents to be very comfortable. And we know sometimes when it comes to city meetings or city council, there's a lot of times where people start to feel there's like power dynamics going on. And so this one is really made to be where it's pretty much organic. I'll also mention that the Manteca's general plan update policies and the design overall, it's not bad. The only thing that really needs to be worked on is strengthening the language. The land use map definitely needs to be fixed. I think there's a lot of issues where it comes to spreading outward instead of looking upward. When you spread outward, that of course opens doors for more sprawl and displacement. And you really need to start focusing on those buffer zones for communities. And then lastly is, of course, making sure that the city mitigates the traffic, the truck traffic, the automobile traffic that will come to increasing population, and also the pollution that comes with it. And then we'll go into the next slide.
First, should we pass it to Hector?
Oh, okay. Yes, Hector,
Hector,
please.
can you briefly introduce yourself, please?
Hello. Thank you, Melissa. So Hector Olivares, and I am the program manager for the Environmental Justice Program here at the Diocese of Stockton. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector.
Thank you, Hector. All right, next slide, please.
Okay.
Okay. In this picture, of course, you see this is a screenshot from the general plan website. This is really the part where I'm going to be providing you context as to why we developed this workshop from the start. The last general plan workshop was held on March 14th, 2019.
Hey, Jonathan,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you, but we're not seeing the slide that you're trying to show us.
I see the slide.
I see it as well.
Okay. Does it say previous meetings?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So the last meeting, community workshop, was held on March 14, 2019. It was held as pretty much as a community open house, which was really meant to be focusing on the preferred land use map and really nothing else. And then later, as you see on the top part of it, on January 27th, 2020, it was actually a scoping meeting. And the scoping meeting wasn't really a community workshop. It was where people could ask questions or provide any comments on the general plan update in general. It was mostly focusing on, what the draft EIR would be about. What are some environmental issues that the residents had that the EIR could be looking at? Next slide, please. And you'll see why in the next slide. We do have a screenshot of what this presentation was like in January. The meeting was definitely focusing on the public input on the environmental issues so that the draft EIR could address. And then we definitely want to make sure that people know that this was actually a very good meeting. We don't want people to make it, we don't want people to get wrong that we're not saying that this was a problem, but we were just asking for more than just this one meeting. There has been what I'm getting at here is that it hasn't been since 2019. There hasn't been a community workshop. And so the way that the city asked residents during that full time from the 2019 to 2020 was to share their input through email or doing it through a public process like a city council or planning commission. The only problem with that is that sometimes people aren't very comfortable, or they don't really know how to even get into the meetings themselves. Or sometimes another thing is maybe they have a lot of things that they would like to include into like as a recommendation or of questions, but they can't fit it in a 250 word or less sort of document. And of course, during 2020, we have to understand that with COVID-19, of course, it spread a lot of cities thin with their capacity. We still started to see local cities around the area, Stockton, Lathrop, and Tracy, Manteca. They were able to do virtual meetings on community workshops. And because the city didn't hold one in 2020, people were pretty much out of the loop on what the general plan was, what was happening during the general plan. And usually when you provide updates on projects, it's pretty much a turnaround on 2 to 3 months. And in between that, we didn't have anything. But to end my context part, I want to let you guys know that it actually, as in sort of a good news sort of thing, on Tuesday, at the joint meeting, City Council and Planning Commission, they said that, yep, the consensus has been with the other public comments that were raised, there's an issue with not having a lot of community workshops. And so they are going to make sure that there are community workshops coming up in May and in June, because it is during the time of, in June of 2020, where they're hoping to finalize this process and pretty much accept the design and the general plan so they can go into implementation. Next slide, please.
So here's an overview of our goals during this workshop. We'll be providing some general planning terms that are outlined in the general plan process. We'll also be identifying some environmental justice concerns, as well as encouraging those of you who are here to develop some recommendations to bring to the city of Manteca to potentially include in the final general plan. So what is a general plan? It is a city's blueprint for future development. It provides the foundation for local land use and planning, and it foresees a vision of 10 to 20 years of planning and development. So it contains particular goals, objectives, policies, and implementation measures to really support the future of the community. And of course, it is primarily used to create healthier neighborhoods depending on which goals and policies are implemented. So here are the key parties that utilize a general plan. It consists of city decision makers, city staff, developers, community members, and to serve the following purposes. One, to identify Manteca's land use, growth, transportation, environmental, economic and social goals and policies as they relate to land use, as well as to enable the City Council and the Planning Commission to establish long-term conservation. And finally, it's informing citizens, developers, decision makers, and other jurisdictions of the policies that will basically guide the development in the future. Here are some general terms that will be discussed during this workshop. So land use planning is the process of deciding where to locate different types of buildings or community uses within a certain area. This includes houses, shopping areas, business districts, parks, schools, government buildings, etc. So we just went over a general plan, which is basically a blueprint. There are several elements throughout a general plan. Elements are essentially, well, they're similar to chapters of a book. It's a section of a general plan that focuses on a specific topic. And finally, a disadvantaged community, which is brought up throughout the general plan. And a disadvantaged community is any community that lacks appropriate resources or experiences significant economic, health, and environmental burdens. And so to add a little bit more context, there are particular census tracts in the city of Manteca that have been identified as a disadvantaged community. And many of these census tracts are predominantly located near some major hotspots, including I-5, Highway 120, and the 99. So here are 7 mandated general plan elements. More recently, in 2016, environmental justice was introduced as an element for a general plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what is environmental justice? The people's definition is the basic right of people to live, work, go to school, play, and pray in a healthy and clean environment. However, I'm sure all of us know that opportunities and resources are not distributed evenly in our society, and the same can be said about access to safe, clean, and healthy places to live. And so these environmental issues disproportionately impact disenfranchised and disadvantaged communities, such as low-income communities and communities of color. So environmental justice is about removing the bad and bringing in the good things to our neighborhoods. So here's a little bit more about SB 1000, which is a state law that requires all cities and counties in California to include environmental justice goals and policies in the general plan, or to add a specific environmental justice element. So here are some of SB 1000's requirements. So using the CalEnviro screen mapping tool, we're able to identify which communities are considered disadvantaged, meaning these communities are disproportionately burdened by multiple sources of pollution. In order to address this, SB 1000 ensures that these communities have equitable access to community benefits such as healthy food, safe and clean homes, access to parks and green spaces, clean drinking water, safe air quality, etc. And here are some examples of environmental burdens that impact, again, disadvantaged communities. So you have air quality and traffic, port and warehouse related freight pollution, living near roadways, especially like major freeways and highways, agricultural and pesticides, and limited public transit. So now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Manteca's general plan. So here is a map of the planning area. The planning area is the geographic area for which the general plan provides a framework for the long-term goals. As you can see, the planning area goes beyond the Manteca city limits, and it goes up north towards French Camp Road. So throughout the general plan, you'll see these terms. These are the essential terms that provide the framework for the general plan. So essentially you have a goal, which is a description of the general desired condition that the community seeks to create. And then you have policies and implementation measures that are supposed to support the original goal. So this is an excerpt from the Manteca General Plan that provides a little bit of context about how to interpret it and how to really interpret the language that you read throughout the general plan. So I wanted to emphasize that many of the goals, policies, and implementation measures laid out in the general plan are not entirely concrete. If you can, actually, I'll just read some of this. So in reading the general plan, one should infer that the goals, policies, and implementation measures are limited to the extent that it is financially feasible and appropriate for the city to carry them out, and to the extent legally permitted by federal and state law. For example, policies and measures which indicate that the city will provide, support, ensure, or otherwise require or carry them out do not indicate an irreversible commitment of city funds or staff resources to those activities, but rather that the city will support them when the city deems that it is financially feasible and appropriate to do so. So essentially, some of these goals do not imply a commitment from the city, and we definitely want to ensure that the city will be held accountable for what is proposed in the general plan. And Jonathan, do you want to take it over?
Sure. So here's an example. This was actually something I screenshotted from the Manteca General Plan update. As you can see, this one is talking about land use, and it's talking a little bit about edible schoolyards and community gardens. Yeah, we're going to provide a lot. There's a lot of negative, but there's also a lot of positive with the Manteca General Plan, such that it does provide some language when, and some language are actually better than some language of other general plans that I've seen and read. And here's an example. I mean, National City, for example, it's on the very bottom. National City is in the San Diego area. It actually is overcomes, it kind of belts up against the Port of San Diego. But as you can see, this one, both of them talk about community gardens. The only difference is that National Cities puts them in perspective, separates them by policy instead of combining them all in one sort of thing like Manteca does. But it's still nice to see that, for one thing, they both of them say encourage. You know, that's the sort of the key word, the key active word. Encourage sustainable local food systems, including farmers markets, community gardens, edible schoolyards, which is a word I really don't see a lot of in general plans, which is very good that Manteca is doing that. Community supported agriculture, neighborhood garden exchanges. That's another big thing that I'm very glad that Manteca was able to include. Federal food assistance programs and healthy food retailers. So that's sort of the example I wanted you guys to get an idea of, and look at, you know, this is another sort of an example of other language that's included in a national city. The only thing is national city is different because this wording that you see here, this policy was made back in 2011. And the HEJ part, you know, policy HEJ stands for Health and Environmental Justice Policy. Now, if you remember, SB 1000, which we talked about just previously, it was implemented in 2016, which made it where all the cities are supposed to update their general plan. So that's pretty much something that is pretty key that I feel, and it's also very pretty huge for actually a small city like National City to do something ahead of the game before anyone else, because they were actually the very first city in California to actually separate environmental justice policy, not as like a principle throughout the thing, but its standalone sort of policy chapter section. Now we're going to go over to the next slide, and Melissa is going to talk about more of the specifics of Manteca's general plan.
Thank you, Jonathan. So when you originally completed the Google form, we asked you to share a little bit about some concerns that you have already identified, and many of you spoke about water resources, climate change, and infrastructure. So we included some of the language in the general plan about those particular goals. And so we really want you to take note of the language here. Many of these policies begin with where feasible. So again, where feasible doesn't necessarily allude to a commitment or that it is a requirement by the city to protect these water resources, for example. We also want to emphasize that when cities are in the planning phase, they should really be proactive rather than reactive, and there should be tangible measures included that can both prevent and address these issues when they arise. So an example of being proactive would include the city incorporating measures such as mitigating or avoiding negative environmental impacts, or requiring that public landscape be drought resistant or have stormwater capture characteristics. And we definitely believe that for goals regarding climate change, these should be proactive as well. And while the language here does present some very important policies, we hope that the city would incorporate more proactive and more, I'm forgetting the word, but more stronger language that implies stronger implementation.
Implementation of green energy infrastructure. It's like solar panels,
Yes.
EV, electric vehicle charging stations. I mean, the only other EV charging stations is what? A lot of them are over there near Target or over there by, by the theater. So there definitely needs to be more of that emphasis of EVs across the area because, as you know, what's happening with the federal government and also in the state, a lot of people are going to start driving a lot of electric vehicles.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan, which brings us to this next point about the city's proposed infrastructure goals. You can see here that the language is a lot more proactive and has stronger implementation. So you can see that, for example, some of these policies include ensuring that parcels zoned for industrial, commercial, and other businesses are adequately served, establishing the development of public facilities and infrastructure to service proposed major employment centers, reserve infrastructure capacity, require development projects, ensure that the public infrastructure required to serve planned economic growth is available and properly phased. So as you can see, the language is much stronger. However, there is no mention of green technology, which we find very critical if we envision a future of sustainable communities. So we took some examples of National City from their general plan. And as you can see, these policies are strictly regarding health and environmental justice, whereas the previous ones were more general and more broad. However, National City has policies that are explicitly aimed towards addressing health and environmental justice.
Okay, so in this map, this is where we're going. This is where we start to become more organic. So if you guys want to speak out, type in the chat or whatever, that'd be great. What color stands out the most in this land use map?
Yellow.
Yellow. Anyone else?
Lots of red, like towards the main streets, intersections.
Yes. So So all those colors are definitely coded, definitely color coded due to the classifications of zoning. And as you can see, hopefully you can see on the left side, red is of course commercial. And as you know, if you were an urban planner, you want to be a lot of the business, or where the businesses are going to get the most clientele, or where they're going to get a lot of views on places, is where there's going to be intersections. So of course you want those corner businesses so that people be able to see. You will also want to make sure a lot of the commercial, a lot of the businesses, local small businesses, are in walking distances. And that's sort of the reason why you see a lot of them predominantly in the intersection areas. And then of course, yes, you definitely see a lot of yellow. And so as you can see, as Melissa alluded to it, she talked about how a little bit of the dashes around it, the city limits. That's pretty much where you guys are at right now. Well, the colors outside of that is where the yellow is. That's where they're hoping to expand. So all that yellow, they're hoping to build more on the left portion, upper left portion of the city, on the right side of the city, almost close to where Delicado is. Then on the corner right side, and then on the bottom part, below, actually really below, on the very bottom parts of 120. That's a concern that we have. And the reason why is because, as I said, it opens doors for sprawl. It opens doors for displacement, and it also opens doors. And the reason why this sprawl is an issue is because you have communities already living here for generations. They need investments from the city. They've been asking for a long time. Now, when you start developing these new cities, you'll start developing these villages. You know, they consider these things villages. What's the city going to do? The city is really going to make sure that the infrastructure there is well invested, that they're able to be up on their feet, pick it up off the ground, so that the community is nice. Because again, those communities and the money, that how much it costs for those houses, it's not going to be 400,000, 300,000. I don't think that has been around for a long time in the city of Manteca. It's going to be about $500,000, $600,000, and that's Bay Area money. That's Bay Area residents that are coming in. And that impacts people. That impacts the housing market. That impacts people's rents. And that doesn't represent really what the Manteca community really is. So I'm going to actually go into the next slide. I actually I actually look at it through Google Maps to provide you some context and actually provide you a perspective of what it's going to look like. First thing off the bat, what do you guys see?
Lovelace. Transfer.
I see homes where there's agriculture.
Mm-hmm. So as you can see, across on the left side of the city is of course the industrial zone. It's already annexed as industrial. There are some spots that haven't been developed warehouses yet, but for sure that's going to be the discussion down the road, is probably building that stuff to be industrial. Some of these areas that are here, where the Amazon warehouse, it looks like it's flat. There's actually a warehouse there already. There are warehouses right here where Penske Logistics are, and I think it's a 511 tactical store that's there. And then on the other,
it's further down. It's closer. The 511 is further down east of the Amazon warehouse. It's not in this picture.
Okay, so on the left side, as you can see, it's more industrial, and that area is on the very upper parts of where the city is at. And of course, on the very top part, they're going to be developing business industrial parks. And then on here, there is of course the mixture of commercial and apartment duplexes, literally across the street from industrial. And also the commercial mixed property that's going to be on Lovelace. And next to the commercial mixed property, it's probably going to be a small shopping center. That's probably usually what they do. And then it's going to be apartments and duplexes, medium and high density residential. That's going to be on the same road as the Lovelace transfer. Now, Lovelace, as you guys know, is a county pocket. It's county owned. there are talks that the county is probably going to sell that land and actually not use that land anymore for a transfer station and just flatten it. But it's still mixed. We don't know. And so as of right now, as an urban planner, you also have to be aware of, what are sort of the legal issues that you have to go through to having to deal with that annexation. So right now it's pretty much protected, but what City Manteca has planned is around it is going to be residential, low density residential, single family housing. Those, of course, that are, suburbs. And that's going to be a huge increase. And also on the right corner of this area, it's going to be duplexes and commercial again. And of course, alongside where the Del Webb community, it's going to be, all that's going to be right up against it. And I always wondered, and I don't know, Phyllis, I don't know if you live in Del Webb, but I always wondered why Del Webb was placed literally across the street from the industrial zone. Do you know?
Well, I know there was a thought that it shouldn't have built it out to the airport because it should have had a buffer between it and the industrial. But, agreed, and that kind of thing came in there. But I don't know. I imagine the land was cheap and, and available. And the city was all for it because it would be bringing in money, which seems to be the issue.
And that's sort of the problem when it comes to health equity, is really looking at and really searching, based off the land and understanding the people. This is a sensitive population, 55 and older. They're probably going to have health problems. And if you start to add more problems with industrial zoning and trucks having to pass through there, it's going to cause a lot of pollution carrying it over to them.
Yeah, we had an issue where they wanted to run the trucks down Airport Way, and we fought it. So they're going to open up the road behind, I forget what it's called, the intermodal way, and it's just 100 feet further. It's not on Airport Way, but it's still not that far away. We've got to deal with trucks. Del Webb was started in 2006. I don't know if you know that.
I did not know that.
Took them about 12 years to finish because of the downturn.
Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't built up in that area at that time, at the beginning. Okay.
And that's another good thing too, is there's a lot of talks in understanding where the trucks are going to be located. Where the STAA trucks in comparison to California legal trucks. California legal trucks are like the trucks that don't have a cab, or they don't have they're not sleeper trucks. They're not ones that are very big. Whereas STAA trucks are actual trucks that are huge, that you can actually sleep in and they can carry more load. And of course, the bigger the truck is, the more damage it's going to do to your roads. And I'm telling you, Manteca is getting there. They're not just yet, but they're starting to look like Turlock, California. Turlock has one of the worst roads in the California. I'm telling you, because I live there and they don't fix it.
Can I add something? I was talking with the councilman, one of the councilmen, about that, and he said the STAAs, airport is a truck route, but it's not a truck route for STAAs. They have to, if they come down, when they come down Roth, they have to turn left and go out to French Camp. And so the other trucks are pretty big. A lot of times they're making deliveries in the town. One of the downsides about this whole area is that we're surrounded by freeways. We are like an intersection. So so the council sees that as something they have to, play up or, use, because that is one of our resources. So it creates problems in other ways.
Sure. Yes. And that's the other thing too. And surprisingly, it's supposed to be not an STAA route, but I should have put pictures in, but I have it on my other camera. I have caught some STAA trucks traveling on here, because sometimes they get caught in a bind, because when they're trying to do a flip on intermodal exchange, unfortunately they get so caught up where they just turn right instead of turning left onto Airport Way to get back onto the back end to 99 or I-5 to go to Roth Road, and then they go on Lathrop Road, and that's pretty much their sort of Lathrop Road, technically on that area, there's still some controversy on what they're trying to do with Lathrop Road. But the idea, all in all, is to make sure that the trucks don't go around the sensitive populations. And I know the city, and I thought I included it in here, but I'll just let you guys know where it says commercial and industrial on the left side. Above that area of and commercial, that's Roth Road. They're going to do an extension route all around there. And if you can actually go, Melissa, on the previous slide, it'll explain as the reason why or how they're going to be designing that. That's the slide after. You want to do, there you go. Okay, so in the box you see it's a weird curve where the residential is. That's going to be the Roth Road extension. They're going to put it's going to be designated an STAA route. And we find that a little bit better. I mean, it's not the best thing, but it's better than going on Airport Way for sure. The only problem that we have is, making sure that the city will provide buffer zones. How are you going to mitigate the traffic? How are you going to mitigate the air pollution? Are you going to put a sound wall? It's probably going to put a sound wall. Are you going to make sure there's a lot of greenery, a lot of vegetative barriers in between there? Because I know for sure that's going to cause a lot of traffic. And then it's going to really reach out on the edge of, on the other side of 99. I have no idea how they're going to do it. I'm guessing it's going to be an overpass. And then it's going to reach all the way down to Austin Road, onto Lathrop Road, and get onto that way. Now, there are other parts. What was that?
Show us with the arrow what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, Melissa, can I have remote control access? Oh, whoa, let's go back. Okay. Let's see. How do I do this? How do I annotate? I can't annotate. Oh, no. Well, that's fine. I'll just give up control. Okay. So, Melissa, if you could please, on the very bottom of your screen, if you could click annotate, there should be an annotate button on the top part. If you're sharing your screen, if you click view options and click annotate, you click annotate, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If you could please choose the spotlight one.
Okay.
Is it red? Can you see red? No, I can't see red. No, that's you're coloring it. Can you please choose not the drawing one, but the one next to it? It should be having like a red dot.
Yes, I have it.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so there's the red dot. So if you could please use the curve onto where the yellow is, on the very edge of where the yellow is, and go all the way across, up a little bit. Yeah, go alongside that curve and go all the way around. There you go. All the way across, all the way across. Right, stop right there. And then swoop into Lathrop Road. So just turn left. There you go. That's how it's going to be. Does that make sense, Phyllis?
Yes.
So they're going to make an overpass over 99, because there's just no way, unless they're trying to mine underneath the 99. I highly doubt it, since it's flat. But they're trying to go along that area. The only problem is that it's riding alongside Delicado, which is on the right corner area. So I don't know how they're going to do that, but that's sort of the plan. And also, as you can see, if you go along Lathrop Road, there's that huge push for yellow along that area, all along that area, those new development areas. And you already know along that side where that interstate is from Lathrop and 99, in between there's already commercial and there's already homes developed there. So SCAA trucks are going to go right through that area. And we'll see. I know for sure there's going to be issues that residents are going to have, and a lot more people are going to be more cognizant about trucks causing the problems with the roads. So it's only a matter of time. But let's go to the next slide so we can start the actual group discussion.
Oops. Okay, so now we want to open it up for the group. These are some general questions we had in mind. First, what are your thoughts about Manteca's growth and development, and what do you foresee as the future of Manteca?
Are we all staying in one group?
Yeah, this
Yes.
is just group discussion right now. We're not moving into breakout rooms yet.
Okay. Well, I want to make one comment. When they started building Del Webb, I heard people that were here at the beginning, and they came and they told, the city came and told the residents they were going to have buffers, and these, you know, these warehouses were going to be back, and there was going to be big buffers and trees, and they were going to be back from airport. And you know, 5 or 6 years later, there's different people in the city government, and those things did not happen. So they make promises that they're not set in stone.
Hello, my name's Lance. I'm the chairman of the Manteca Millennial Advisory Committee. I just wanted to say hello. Thanks for putting this on. It's very well done and a serious issue to those in the community. Question number one, what are your thoughts on Manteca's growth and development? Like you said, Jonathan, very well put, sprawl, just continuing the sprawl. That seems to be the number one way that Manteca plans on funding themselves, is through increased LDR in all directions possible. Do I like that? Absolutely not. I think that we should be reinvesting in our communities, especially those that have been here and are negatively affected by the growth of Manteca. I live on a Strode, which is a 4-lane, 2 in one direction, 2 in the other on Main Street. And it's just a nightmare. We aren't really focusing on our current residents. We're not focusing on getting our tax revenue through building up and not out, just like you said. And our infrastructure is, we're seeing the effects of it, because while we can get funding to put in these new communities wherever we need, the funding is not back around when we need to fix the roads. And unfortunately, the community doesn't want to pay taxes on it. So now the roads are in disrepair. And where do I see the future of Manteca? I think that Manteca is, at least with our current, trajectory, it's just going to be the same old story. I don't see anything really changing with Manteca, just more LDR. There's a lot of good organizations out there trying to do some good things, but it seems like it's falling on deaf ears. And the leadership at Manteca is having issues adapting to the younger residents' concerns about the future.
Well said. Well said, Lance. I'm glad. Thank you for being here. I'm very glad. And I actually want to tell you guys, I'm actually really jealous. That's the one thing Manteca has above Stockton, is you guys actually have a millennial advisory committee. When you guys had that, I was very impressed. And there's actually were talks of some, you guys have you guys had a young adult, you have a young adult one, but you guys didn't have like a millennial group. And so I'm very glad that Manteca was able to do that. You guys have a very good group. Your guys' social media is very well put. And so I want to thank you for joining this thing, and your opinions are definitely valued. And I think there needs to be more of that younger leadership on city council, because I think there needs to be more on, you look forward, but also you look at the connections that could be built over a period of time. Unfortunately, you think of the old school sort of way of keeping things laissez-faire. Unfortunately, you gotta be willing to take risks. Oh, thanks. Gabe, what do you think?
Yes. Hi, hello. My name's Gabe. Nice to meet you all. My thoughts on the current Manteca's growth and development. Currently, the way I see it is that, as we all mentioned, it was a sprawl, but the sprawl, one of the big consequences of it is the environmental impact. Like, our air quality has just gotten worse over the last 10 years. And, that's not necessarily a Northern California thing. It's a global thing, and with climate change and carbon emissions worldwide, the Central Valley and Manteca specifically has been feeling that effect as well, because we were one of the hardest hit back when those fires were going on, and over the years it's just gotten worse and worse, just with the pollution of all the trucks in the interstate and 99 and all those roads. So the air quality has just been getting horrible, right? And it's just going to get worse from here if we decide to expand and increase the industrial sprawl as well as the residential one. And increasing the residential sprawl will just put more people at risk, especially with the not even considering buffer zones, which is, as Phyllis was saying, they're promising and promising, and and if they don't deliver on those things, they're just putting people in danger, right? And the more people that come to live here, is just going to increase that liability tenfold, exponentially over the next coming decades. And what do I foresee as the future? I foresee the future of Manteca. I mean, at its current trajectory, I think that the city council is currently putting like economic incentive over social incentive, right? I see Manteca kind of being more as like on its current trajectory, being more of like a focus of an industrial hub, with pollution getting worse and a lot more trucks coming through, and the people just suffering in general, right? And as Lance was saying, right, we need to reinvest in our communities. And another aspect I want to bring up about this is that Manteca has also a really big homeless problem as well, right? And so while we expand these residential areas, these suburbs outward, all of this money and all this housing is going to Bay Area people, Bay Area residents, people that have the money to pay for these kinds of living. And meanwhile, the people that live here are getting pushed out by the ever increasing property values are just rising and rising and rising. And so even our own residents eventually at this point are going to start getting pushed out onto the streets because they can't afford the rent anymore. And instead of investing in all this industry and all this business, the city should be reinvesting into our own communities and the people who actually need housing, as opposed to the people who want to move out of the Bay Area.
Well said. Dave Atherton, what do you think?
Well, I am relatively new to community planning, so I have a lot to learn here. And I understand and agree with a lot of what's been said here. I am concerned about climate change, actually, and our role in the cause. There's mention. There's a lot of explanation about it in the EIR, and there's a lot. It's mentioned in a lot of places in the general plan, the draft general plan. But as was said, some of the language is kind of weak in some of these items. I need to go reread them and see where I want to suggest strengthening language. And when climate change is addressed in the general plan, it's in two different areas. One is how we're going to deal with the effects of climate change. So there's some talk about that. But then there's what are we going to do to reduce our contribution to the cause? And that's an area that I think is especially weak in the general plan. But we do have some people in the staff and on the planning commission who care about these things. So I think if we brought up some suggestions, I think some change could be made in the general plan.
Mary, what do you think? Well, I think Mary, you'll be the, unless anyone else wants to be after Mary.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. My biggest issue, and it's been focused for about the last 4.5 years, is the placement of the light industrial. And light industrial, in my opinion, has absolutely no business being slated and approved for the west side of Airport Way. That's all the way from just past the Costco Center and the sports facility and the fun zoning, all the way up to Lathrop Road. There has to be some protection for those residents who currently own and live in their homes on the east side of Airport Way. That, because of the prevailing winds, when you put additional trucks in that area, especially refrigerator trucks that have to keep running, they can't turn off, it's important that the people have to realize that that pollution is going to be traveled over their neighborhoods, over the hospital, over the golf course. It's a direct downwind from all that pollutants, and that area there should remain R1 or open space or a buffer zone to create a zoning between Lathrop's industrial area to ours. It has to be, for them to put that there, and I understand that they did have a company that was coming in and buying the property in that area, and they were very interested in having that develop into all warehouses. And apparently, from what I understand from JD, that deal fell through. It's just bad planning, no foresight on the irreversible health issues that are going to occur by putting that light industrial in that area. We've already got the school bus shed, which, they're all diesel. We have all of the industrial coming in from Tracy and Lathrop into our area. We can't combine it with more warehouses when we have so many alternative issues where those can be up north, down south, where they won't have immediate impact to those residential areas. So I'm all for having that open zone, having it a public quasar public. There's so many different things that we can do with that. We can even slate some of it so that possibly we could have a higher learning facility such as a Delta extension, trades, even offices would be so much better than having those diesel trucks come down through there. And then they're going to go down to the 120, then they're going to go up, catch Lathrop Road, go to 99 and I-5 and impact all the residents who live on those streets and also all the people who currently live in the older part of Lathrop. So again, all that would be taken care of. You wouldn't have the pollution, you wouldn't have the problems, you wouldn't have the parking issues that we have on Airport Way if we just change that back to R1 open buffer zone and eliminate the trucks having to get out of our inner cities out to the major freeways and highways.
Well said, Mary. Lance.
Yeah, sorry, Mary just brought up some really good points that I wanted to touch on. We have so much space available south of the 120 that we could use for these industrial endeavors. But instead we started building residential housing, which I understand, that was before, I guess this really became a centralized issue. But I don't understand why we continue making the same mistakes and building more LDR, whereas we keep pushing these industrial zones closer to our established housing. When we have all of this space, why don't we create those areas to where trucks aren't driving through Airport, aren't driving through Main Street? We have the 120, we have the 99, we have the 5, but yet we choose to build our housing near there instead of our industrial areas.
Yes.
It just doesn't make sense. It's counterproductive to then instead stick your industrial areas in the middle of your residential, your historical residential areas. Really, it's exploiting the low income and the established Manteca families for the benefit of Bay Area housing, extreme low density residential. And it's really a shame
I
that this
agree.
has gone on as long as it has.
But yeah, I agree. Having it on the southern parts of 120 would have been nice. But now I'm trying to look at where the map of Manteca is. And on the bottom of Manteca is what?
Housing.
Well, I mean, bottom of where the housing is. There's a buffer, a little bit of a buffer zone on the bottom portion of Manteca, but I'm trying to look at what's the next city over on the bottom part. I know Rippon's on the right side. Is it Ripon?
Ripon.
Oh, well, there you go.
I mean, it's really a whole bunch of agriculture down there. I mean, there's a giant area to expand upon.
Yeah. Yep. And there's a state park. That could be the reason.
It's not that big, Jonathan. Caswell.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a small river, wide spot in the river, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah. So it is pretty much agricultural. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that in the flood? Isn't that in the flood zone there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I mean, we haven't had rain, but that's part of how it's been zoned. And there's some issues. I mean, sometimes Cantu talks about that, about the area.
Yeah, that is true. It is in the flood zone, and that's why they do a good stop right there to where, because I know Marty Harris always talks about it, and I think that was something that really woke him up was, all right, let's not really expand more down below. Let's like keep the area at ease so we don't expand more to where we get connecting to Ripon area. Because I don't even know how far Ripon extends, but there's all that land agricultural. It's crazy.
Right. What's interesting is that the residential that continues getting built south of the 120 in that historical 100-year floodplain, the developers are financing the rebuilding and re-strengthening of the dikes. I can't remember the exact word for them.
Levee?
The levees, yes. But if we encourage industrial growth to the south instead, I mean, that's where you've got the real income to be able to strengthen our levees and have people that can reinforce them as needed throughout time in order to protect their investments. Whereas these developers, they'll strengthen the levees just to the correct amount so that they can build their houses, and then the homeowners are in the they're going to be negatively affected by these environmental outcomes of building south.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, go ahead, Phyllis.
I know there was some talk at one time when I was talking with Gary that he had a vision of having like offices along the 120, built or along, just, I don't know where the areas are available, but along the 120, because the ease of getting to them and that kind of thing. Now, after COVID, I don't know, because a lot of people are working from home. So I don't know if offices are going to be a thing of the future or not.
See, I mean, I'm telling you, that's the life of being an urban planner. I can't even imagine how stressed they are. Some of these urban planners like DeNovo and all these others, they do couple cities on general plans. I don't know how they work in tandem, because I would be stressed out. And I think that's sort of the thing that, when you're being part of this, when the city, you got to really understand the characteristics of the city. You got to know the people of the city. And that's the other thing too, is opening the door for this new idea of community benefit agreements. When industry come in, a warehouse starts coming in, a lot of Bay Area communities do that. Stockton is starting to do that with a tenant in Port of Stockton. But the idea is, if you come into our community, you are going to agree with us through a contract that you are going to actually provide benefits to us. The surplus amount of money that you're gonna get every year has to go to something, either a scholarship or something, so that we can have, or the money goes into green projects. But you can't just come in, utilize our land, utilize our roads without any sort of benefits for us. Because technically, a lot of these companies, they're not paying for the roads, but they're destroying them. Amazon and all these other ones, they're destroying the roads, but they don't have to pay them at all.
Okay. Yeah, this is exploitation.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm glad you guys were able to talk about that. We're actually going to go to the actual next slide. Is going to be something else, but then the other next slide is going to be actually the breakout room. So Melissa, if you could please.
Yes, thank you everyone for all of your responses. That was such thoughtful feedback, and we definitely share some of the same concerns. And actually, here are some additional EJ and community issues identified in both Manteca and Lathrop from previous surveys that Catholic Charities has administered. So again, some of the same concerns of low density residential sprawl, affordable housing, a lack of high quality jobs for local residents, not enough bus routes, high frequency of diesel freight trucks. So now we're going to move into our breakout session. So I'm just going to link our notes document.
Yep.
And everyone will be designated in their own automatically in the breakout session. So you don't get to choose.
What will we be talking about?
We will talk. The breakout rooms will be discussing. Actually, with what we learned about so far about the policies, we are actually going to create recommendations for the city and how we, if we were the city planner, how would we change it? How would we change the language to make it stronger? And we'll also talk about, remember the sentences instead of using passive language, using active language. And also looking at, comparing like the national city, looking at, with your guys' concerns that you guys talked about, putting those sort of ideas into a policy, into the Manteca General Plan. Because I know for sure there are some aspects that are kind of general, but they're not as specific as what you said. So we'll actually go into the breakout rooms and come up with some ideas. Melissa, if you could please put this into it. Great. Okay, so that wasn't enough time for us. I mean, we were going really good. I don't know about y'all, but Lance was coming through with the fire, with the heat on the goals. So I think in the next slide, I think we're probably going to, I think it's like a report out.
Yeah, so I guess our group, since we're number one, we can go first. Gabe, if you want to give our report back.
Sure, definitely. Let me just pull out the doc. Okay, so our group, the issue that we wanted to focus on specifically was the truck routes that go through residential areas throughout Manteca, and about how police and law enforcement turn like a kind of a blind eye to them when the trucks come through, and that buffers whenever they're promised and they're given, they're like taken away, through some legal process. I forgot what it was at the top of my head. So the way that we wanted to tackle this was to make sure that the general plan has like more strong verbiage that is more consequential, as opposed to very broad and kind of detached from any sort of like tangible commitment to change and enforcement. So we kind of came up with that the city should use words like must and shall, like the city, the city shall create truck routes that avoid residential areas and population centers of sensitive nature, right? And shall provide buffer zones when, in which case a truck route goes through a residential area or within a certain distance. So that's kind of what we came up with.
Thank you so much, Gabe.
No problem.
Okay, well, I'm going to have Lance throw up his, in addition to what we came up on the first one, his two other ones.
Yeah, I was kind of just getting started. I think I'll just ramble. I think that with the truck routes, we have to, we've seen that the Manteca bus route is not being utilized fully. I think that Manteca can possibly be a bikeable city. I think that the general plan should include protected bike lanes on truck routes in particular. That's our main street if we are going to include airport, because cars and buses just fly by me on my bike at 40 miles an hour. It's terrifying within just feet. So I think including protected bike lanes would be important, as well as an area for a college or a higher education learning place should be included in the general plan. We see many warehouses going up. We're planning for jobs that don't allow Manteca residents to own a home. What we need to do is create a space for educational opportunities for Mantecans. There's one in Stockton, there's one in Modesto. We need to have one here in Manteca.
No, that actually brings up a good point. You talked about the bike lanes. I always see on the Facebook, I'm telling you, I'm on those Facebook community groups. You all have those Manteca rant and raves, or the raves and reflections things. It's always just about potholes. It's always about the people with bike lanes, when they says, we need a bike lane in Airport Way. That's the thing is, do they even have ideas, or even SJCOG have ideas or plans to provide the funding to help develop the structure on a road that allows bike lanes? Because unfortunately, it needs to be protected. If you're going to allow that area to be where trucks can utilize it, not SCA trucks, but California legal trucks, you got to make sure those bikes are protected for sure. And I know there aren't any bike lanes at all. I mean, it's pretty much a dead zone out there. And I think there needs to be a way where it's carefully stripped to where they can have a bike lane there. And then also there's other parts in the city that still need a bike lane. Have you used, Lance, have you rid on the one, is it the 120? Has that been, or that new one, the new Diamond, does that have a bike?
No, actually, I haven't ridden down that because I live north of it, and there's really no reason to go south. There's no real, just go to Bass Pro or something, but I'm not really, I don't buy a whole lot of stuff there. So it's mainly just around town. So I think that we've taken a good step creating painted bike lanes, especially with the nice green that we see around town. However, in the next 10 years, I would like to see protected bike lanes where it's separated from traffic, so that people aren't bicycling on the sidewalks where pedestrians should be walking.
Lance, what is protected bike lanes? Is that like a divider between?
Yes, it would be a concrete divider. It could be a plastic, just in the initial stages, just plastic kind of little poles or metal poles that just are created so that the bikes are separated from traffic, and cars stay a safe distance from bicycles.
There's also the one, if you it's like the ones in Modesto, MJ, it's wet. I don't know the difference between the campuses, where the cars are actually it's a one-lane road, but the cars actually parked on the literally on the road. It used to be a two-lane road, but now it was changed to where it's a road diet, where it became a parking spot for the cars to park. And then the next side, usually where the cars would park next to the sidewalk, is actually a designated bike route. So that means in between where the actual cars that are traveling, in the middle, there's parked cars. And then the other side would be the bike lanes. So technically they are protected unless the cars want to hit a parked car. But that's another sort of improvement that really does take a road diet. And just the route that I would love, it would have been great to see in downtown, but I'm just telling you, just the amount of traffic that's going, that would cause even more. And that's human behavior that people, unfortunately, and that's the thing too, it's there's so many factors that you have to in play here. You provide local jobs, so people are more likely to use bicycles instead of having to travel. But when you start to open the door for sprawl, for low density residential, they're going to drive. They're going to drive places. That was the issue with the highways and the freeways back in 1930s and 1940s. After World War II. they opened it for, suburban and had the city in the main area and other warehouse, other shopping centers out there. And now people weren't investing in downtowns anymore. There's a lot of things that happen. And I know a lot of urban planners have to go through. I mean, I know we are at the end parts of the time, but I wanted Melissa, if you wanted to end it off with the last slides with the contact information.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you again, everybody, for participating in that activity. So here we have the contact information of JD Hightower, who is the planning manager. We have provided his contact information so that if any of you feel compelled to reach out to him and share your input, your opinion, we feel that would be very critical, especially during this process. We feel that the community definitely needs to be engaged and needs to be a part of this planning process. So we hope that you feel empowered to do so. You can also provide your input by submitting a public comment or attending the next joint meeting between the City Council and the Planning Commission and providing a comment there. Jonathan, do you have any other next steps?
Oh, I unfortunately forgot to include the slide of the picture screen that I from their.
Jonathan, you're breaking up.
Yeah, your audio is off a little bit. Can you try turning off your camera? Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I guess I forgot to put the picture of what happened from the meeting. That included the sort of the dates that they're trying to do for the next steps from the presentation that they did. But yes, the next week is the next one for the joint planning commission and city council. That of course is going to be very, very full, but not a lot of really a space for community involvement or community or input in person or organically allow you to talk about it generally. It's really supposed to be specifically about, if you have any questions on, like the EIR, for instance. But I mean, you can't do anything about, really what's good is if people are there, not there officially in like in a city council planning commission stand, but mostly in like in a room and we're happening in person, of course, distance and with masks. But we are working with the city on doing that because it is definitely very critical. And that pretty much should be it. And
yeah,
the next slide.
So what we'll do is provide a follow-up email containing this information and containing the notes that we took during this workshop today. So lastly, we just want to thank you so much for joining us today. Here is our contact information if you would like to connect with us. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you once again, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your Friday night.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Lance.
Good night.
Bye, guys. See you, Gabe.